The Kingdom of Kongo: How European Colonialism Redefined an African Power. What if one of the most sophisticated political systems of the 14th century existed not in Europe, but in Central Africa? And what if it was dismantled not by conquest alone, but by commerce? The Kingdom of Kongo held power from the 14th to the 19th century, across territory that is now the Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola. 5 centuries of continuous political authority. The people of this kingdom were the Bakongo. Their civilization wasn't a loose tribal confederation. It was a structured state with defined provinces, appointed leadership, and royal taxation administered through a network of market towns connecting the interior to the Atlantic coast. Congo was organized into 12 provinces, each headed by a governor nominated directly by the king. This wasn't decentralized chaos. It was deliberate administrative architecture, designed to project royal authority across vast distances. Here's where Congo's political structure surprises. Kingship wasn't hereditary. Any Mukongo, any member of the Bakongo people, could in principle be elected king. Power was legitimized by selection, not bloodline. When a king died, a council of 12 wise men governed until a successor was elected. This wasn't a power vacuum. It was a constitutional safeguard, a designed continuity mechanism centuries before that concept had a name in European political theory. The Bakongo were also skilled artists. Congo developed a distinctive visual culture, one that became particularly striking for its synthesis of Christian iconography with indigenous symbolic traditions after contact with Portuguese missionaries in the late 15th century. Portuguese ships reached the Congo coastline in 1483. Initial contact was diplomatic. The reigning king, João I, known in Kikongo as Nzinga Antinu, exchanged ambassadors with Lisbon and sent Congolese nobles to study in Portugal. For a brief window, this looked like engagement between equals. It wasn't. By the early 16th century, Portuguese demand for enslaved labor to work Brazilian plantations transformed the relationship entirely. The transatlantic slave trade didn't just extract people from Congo, it began rewiring the kingdom's internal politics around the economics of human capture. The Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, the most comprehensive scholarly record of the trade, documents over 1 million people from the Congo region forcibly transported to the Americas between 1500 and 1900. By that measure, the Congo region was the single largest source of enslaved Africans in the entire Atlantic trade. The trade created a devastating feedback loop. Provincial governors who cooperated with Portuguese traders gained weapons and wealth. Those who refused were sidelined. The 12-province system, once a tool of royal coherence, became a competition for access to European goods. King Afonso I of Congo, who ruled from approximately 1509 to 1542, rode directly to the Portuguese crown protesting the devastation. His letters, preserved in Lisbon's National Archives, describe villages emptied, families destroyed, and a kingdom being consumed from within. But here's the finding that reshapes the entire narrative. European colonial rule didn't completely eradicate Bakongo cultural, political, and economic life. The Congo state persisted, diminished but structurally recognizable, for centuries after Portuguese contact. The elective kingship model, the very system that made Congo's governance flexible, allowed it to adapt. New kings could be elevated who were better positioned to negotiate, resist, or redirect external pressure. The constitution bent without breaking. The decisive rupture came at the Battle of Mbuila in 1665. A Portuguese-backed Angolan army defeated Congo forces and killed King Antonio I. This wasn't the end of Congo, but it shattered central authority and opened 60 years of civil war among rival claimants. The civil war that followed Mbuila did what centuries of external pressure had failed to do alone. It fragmented the 12-province structure. Governors who had once been the king's appointed agents became autonomous warlords competing for Portuguese trade access and military support. This is the pattern colonial rule imposed across Africa. Where complex, distributed governance existed, colonialism replaced it with what historians call bureaucratic autocracy, centralized control designed to serve extraction, not the governed population. Beyond political restructuring, colonial powers stripped Congo's material resources. Ivory, copper, and rubber were extracted at scale. Communities that had sustained themselves through trade networks built over centuries were reduced to labor pools for European commercial interests. There's a persistent misconception worth correcting directly. The Berlin Conference of 1884 is often described as a unifying exercise that brought order to Africa. It did the opposite. It divided Africa among European powers, with no regard for existing political structures, ethnic communities, or territorial logic. For the Bakongo, the Berlin Conference's partition wasn't abstract. It physically divided Congo territory between Portugal, Belgium, and France. A people with a 5-century political identity were suddenly subjects of 3 separate European empires. Simultaneously, the Berlin Partition also formalized a colonial strategy that would define African governance for the next century: ethnic division. By drawing borders that deliberately separated or artificially merged communities, colonial administrators manufactured dependencies on European arbitration to manage the resulting tensions. Remember the elective kingship, the constitutional safeguard that let any Mukongo become king. Colonial administrations eliminated precisely these indigenous legitimacy structures, replacing them with appointed chiefs who answered to European district officers, not to Bakongo communities. The deepest insight here isn't that Congo was destroyed by violence, it's that it was transformed by institutional replacement. The slave trade and colonial rule didn't simply kill people and burn villages. They substituted Congo's own governance logic with a foreign one designed for extraction. Yet, Congo's artistic tradition survived as cultural resistance. The kingdom's synthesis of Christian visual culture with Bakongo symbolic systems produced a body of sacred art that scholars recognize as entirely distinct, neither European Christianity nor pre-contact Congo, but something new. Congo's trajectory isn't exceptional, it's the template. Across sub-Saharan Africa, colonial powers encountered sophisticated political systems and replaced them with local authoritarianism that served European interests. The Democratic Republic of Congo's first post-independence decade illustrates this directly. When Belgium withdrew in 1960, it left behind a state with fewer than 30 university graduates and a civil service entirely dependent on Belgian administrators. That wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate structural deficit. The sharpest example of what colonial extraction looked like in the Congo region is the rubber quota system imposed by King Leopold II of Belgium between 1885 and 1908. Congolese communities were assigned mandatory rubber harvest quotas. Failure to meet them was punished by mutilation. The system killed an estimated 10 million people on the exact territory the Kingdom of Kongo had governed for 5 centuries. But here's the detail most histories omit. Bakongo identity didn't disappear. Today, an estimated 10 million people across DR Congo, Angola, and Republic of Congo identify as Bakongo. The political structures were dismantled. The people and their identity were not. Because so many Bakongo were transported across the Atlantic, Congo cultural elements survived in the Americas. Scholars have traced Congo symbolic systems in Haitian voodoo, Brazilian candomblé, and African American spiritual traditions. The diaspora carried the culture the colonizers couldn't erase. Here's a detail that stops most people cold. The Dikenga, the Congo cosmogram, a 4-quadrant cross representing the cycle of life, death, and spiritual power, appears not only in Haitian Vodou Veve diagrams and Brazilian candomblé ritual ground markings, but has been documented by art historians on pottery made by enslaved Bakongo in South Carolina as early as the 18th century. The symbol traveled 4,000 miles and survived 2 centuries of forced erasure. The Kingdom of Kongo demands that we retire the colonial-era framing that treated African political structures as primitive or pre-political. Consider the specifics: 12 administered provinces, an elected head of state, a constitutional interregnum council, a royal taxation system, and a diplomatic corps that sent ambassadors to Lisbon in the 15th century. By any comparative standard, these are the features of a mature state. We opened by asking whether one of the most sophisticated political systems of the 14th century existed in Central Africa. The answer is unambiguously yes, and understanding how it was dismantled forces a reckoning with what was actually lost, not just in Congo, but across an entire continent. The Kingdom of Kongo wasn't a casualty of weakness. It was a sophisticated civilization reshaped by a system designed to extract, divide, and replace. And the political geography of Central Africa today is still in measurable ways living inside that design. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more.